the voice of health, freedom, and liberty, Robert Scott Bell.
You know, some people were a little upset. Even dear friends of mine were upset about the interview I did with Jonathan Emord the other day. Mm-hmm. All right? Mm-hmm. I thought it was really interesting and fascinating because, listen, Emord's on the inside as inside gets. He's dealing with Supreme Court stuff. He's tackling the FDA. He's a real hero of mine. And he came on and said, listen, Ron Paul ain't going to get it. We got to get behind Romney. Not that he was endorsing Romney and everything. You see, the thing is, he wasn't. He knows. Yeah. He knows Romney's not all that, and he knows even Paul Ryan's not all that. I brought that up, but at the same time, it's a bit irritating to those of us who love what Ron Paul stands for and want to see it all the way to the hopefully not so bitter end, if you know what I mean.
I do. And, the word that's been thrown around lately with what's been going on with the RNC is the word compromise.
Not the C word. You did not say the C word.
I did. And I got to tell you, I've been monitoring things, across the internet in the Ron Paul movement.
Yes.
And man, I got to tell you, that word is a dirty word. It's a very, very dirty word. And I have to say, after, putting some thought into it, listening to, Emord and reconciling my own thoughts and feelings about it, I have to say I agree. I agree with the general sentiment out there that compromise is not the right way to go.
Wait a second. Super Don, you're married. I'm married. Do we not compromise with our wives occasionally?
Well, Robert, you have to think. Compromise on what? Are we compromising on what's for dinner tonight? Are we compromising on,
yes, I'm standing my ground on principle. I will not eat that for dinner.
No, I will. Well, if you've got principles about what you're going to eat for dinner, then I guess that's
you're not going to be married a long time. I say, honey, thank you. Whatever it is, I'm going to eat it.
You can't compromise on principle. And what are we talking about here? Mm-hmm. We're talking about, and I know we throw the word war, we got war on drugs, war on cancer, war on everything. But, there are times where I think the principle of war applies. And there is a war going on for liberty.
Battle lines are drawn. And you see the RNC had declared war on Ron Paul early on in this election cycle. And the media did as well. There was no lack of, let's say, subterfuge, overt and covert attacks against the campaign. And now we're seeing what kind of compromises are being made. It's like you either allow us to take half of your delegates away or none of them are coming. See, that's the kind of compromise I see the RNC is trying to make the Ron Paul people make, which is not a compromise. That's coercion.
We've been in this fight for a long time with Ron Paul for years throughout, numerous campaigns. And look, these people, they have poured blood, sweat, and tears into getting to wgive we are today.
Becoming delegates even.
When somebody comes up to them and says, "Hey, why don't you compromise? We'll give you a little bit of what it is that you've been fighting all this time for, so, just to get along." And I thought to myself, could you imagine if compromise was something that was applied to every war, every battle, every a fight for principle? I mean, you remember the movie 300?
Yeah, that was a wild visual movie,
great movie.
Did they compromise?
And I was thinking, could you imagine what it would have sounded like if in the movie 300 they decided to compromise?
This day, we rescue a world from mysticism and tyranny and usher in a future brighter than anything we can imagine. Give thanks, man! To Leonidas and the brave 300! To victory!
Oh, on second thought, guys, let's just compromise. I'm sure we can get at least something that we want out of this.
Oh, no, don't compromise on tyranny. Come on, no, you can't do that.
That wouldn't work. You can't do that. Those guys were fighting for what? They were trying to bring down tyranny. They were defending themselves,
mysticism, right? Biological mysticism we talk about.
That's right.
Good cause.
Compromise would not work in that situation. Now, here's another one that came to mind. Braveheart.
Yeah, why not William Wallace?
Excellent movie. Could you imagine what would have happened had William Wallace decided to compromise?
And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Or maybe we could compromise with the English and get just a little bit of what we want. That's good enough.
Okay, so you draw and quarter them anyway. No, that kind of compromise? No
I'll
way.
apologize now for my horrible
That was actually pretty cute. That was pretty cute.
But, I mean, you kind of see where I'm going with this. There are times where compromise is something where, you're trying to reach a middle ground. But there are times where I feel like you can't do that.
Yes.
That what is at stake, what you're fighting for, is not something that you can compromise on. And, I know the first two examples that we've used here were fictional characters for the most part.
William Wallace was real. I mean,
he was
fictionalized. But what about Winston Churchill? I mean, we had the Olympics in England. I mean, there's a classic case of he should have compromised, right?
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Or maybe we could just compromise. That would probably be good enough as long as we get a little bit of what we want.
What I say, this is the wussification, wimpification of America. Why can't we just all get along? Listen, If anybody's trying to get along, honestly, it's Ron Paul with the principles of liberty and the freedom to live your life as Americans were ordained to do by our founding fathers. Said, go out there and live. The government, get out of the way. That's the compromise we're talking about. We'll compromise with you, government. We'll let you exist if you get the hell out of the way. But I'm an idealist, yes. But I am a realist to realize what the founding fathers, what history teaches us, is that the best we can hope for in an ideal world with an ideal government is a government constrained and made as small as possible so it does the least amount of damage to the people, we the people here and the people abroad. And that is not what I see, certainly in the Democratic Party, but it's not also what I see in the establishment Republican Party. As Ryan wants to put the brakes on 30 years down the road, and Romney doesn't have a plan to balance the budget, if it's even possible. So, I'm with you here. I understand pragmatism in the political realm, and Ron Paul has stuck around and been in the midst of the belly of the beast for a long time, just like even Jonathan Emord, the FDA Dragon Slayer. He's been in the belly of the beast fighting. He's still doing battle. And so what is the word compromise? What does it mean in terms of what we want to see versus what the RNC is doing? Because I think it's a little different.
Robert, here's the question. What are we getting out of this compromise? What are they really giving us? We're going to let you have a presence. Well, thank you very much. We've been fighting for how long now through this campaign and have dealt with state by state by state in order to get to where we're at now. We've got a plurality in 5 states. Now you want to take that plurality away from us. Tell us who can and cannot be seated at the convention.
No.
And what? You're gonna incorporate some language into your plank?
That is not a compromise.
No, that is not a compromise. That is a defeat. And I understand why a lot of people feel that way. Now, it's very interesting. When I was looking up information on compromise, I came across some audio from almost exactly a year ago where Ron Paul was actually talking about the idea of compromise. And he had some interesting comments to make.
Well, let's go to the good doctor himself right now.
You're talking about compromising. And I think believing in something, I think counterfeiting money is compromising. Paper money is bad and gold money is good. So we compromise and say, well, we'll wean ourselves off. That is a compromise that is devastating. So property rights. Okay, we'll have property rights unless we have eminent domain come in and take your property, give it to a big corporation. That's a compromise.
Wow, brilliant as usual. I mean, the Constitution says only gold and silver is money, and yet the Federal Reserve Act unconstitutionally says, well, no, it's not, but doesn't mention it. Now it's fiat, funny money that can be printed out of thin air or now entered in the computer age into digits, and we're getting ready for QE 15.5.
Yes,
but Ron Paul has some more to say here, does he not?
He does.
No, you're saying no compromise. So wasn't.
Well, I made my point. Do you think I should compromise on the First Amendment? On property rights, on your property rights? Should I sell your house because a businessman wants it and he can pay more taxes? Why don't you want somebody to stand on principle? Why?
Dagnam, he's good, isn't he?
Yes.
That's compromise. I'm not.
It's
compromising
very clear.
principle.
It's very clear where Ron Paul stands on compromise. That you can compromise, or actually the word he likes to use is create coalitions, which is far different than compromising. But when it comes to principle, there's no shaking this guy. He stood on principle his entire life.
Yep. And listen, he has created coalitions with people that he disagrees with on many issues. Case in point, Dennis Kucinich. And where they do agree, he's created a coalition.
Ralph Nader.
Yep. Nader as well.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Well, Ron Paul's got more to say on compromise.
Tell me how you have used that stance to pass significant legislation with bipartisan support. What bill? What can you?
Okay, I have a good example. At least through the House of Representatives.
No, I'm talking about into law.
Well, under the circumstances that I'm trying to repeal a lot of bad ideas of about 100 years, just holding the line is a major achievement. But I haven't because there's too much misinformation. Too many people have learned Keynesian economics. Too many people believe in big government. Too many people believe in more taxes. Too many people don't care about personal liberties. Too many people compromise and say, well, we have to give up some of our freedoms to be safe, so that's why we need the Patriot Act, and that's why we need the TSA agents prodding and probing and x-raying us. So that's all a compromise that we don't need.
Yeah, he nailed that on the compromise that we don't need. It's the compromise of, well, we can make you a little bit safer if you give up a little bit of your freedom, right? Yep. That was considered a compromise because the terrorists might get you. So you abandon the principle of liberty in order to have a false sense of security. That's the kind of compromise I think the RNC is playing along with now as they're trying to cut the delegates out of the equation so that Ron Paul can't be nominated from the floor.
Yep. And I think that, the thing that you have to think about here is that you heard him talking about the reason why he hasn't been able to pass legislation that has actually become law is because he's trying to undo 100 years of BS that has found its way into politics. And I draw an analogy to what it is that's going on with the delegates now. The delegates are fighting to try and undo all of the corruption and all of the mess that has gotten into politics, that has gotten into the Republican Party, and to ask them to compromise now, that is a defeat because this is what we're fighting for. We're fighting to make that change. And if you try and take that away from us, we're not going to just sit down and go away.
This country was founded on some really horrible compromises, whether it was about slavery.
Good point.
and it wouldn't have existed had they not made some pretty tough compromises.
See,
you're not willing to
I would have never compromised on the slavery issue. I think you make my point because we did that. We did the compromise and we became, relative value on rights. We said, well, we'll sacrifice this whole principle. And what did it do? It led to a civil war. So they should have stood firm.
And then there would have been no United States.
And,
we're okay with that.
And we would have had a loose-knit group of states that may have come together later on. But why give up and plant the seeds of disaster?
So,
just think of the harm done because of that there was relative value.
I'm not arguing that it's good.
Oh, I know, but you're arguing the case for compromise.
Wow. I mean, this guy goes so deep, as he always has. I want to say a special thanks to all the Daily Paul readers that gave a shout-out and gave us some feedback on this, including one call that came through on this, Super Don. We actually want to get to that so we can get your voices to be heard at 866-939-BELL. Let's hear from Tim in Albany, New York.
Mr. Bell, I recently became aware of your radio show, and I will start this comment by saying that you have caught my attention, and I intend to pay closer attention to your show. My name is Tim from Albany, New York. In response to your posting on the Daily Paul website regarding is the compromise a good thing, at this time it's difficult for everyone to know. There certainly seems to be some kind of a cloud of discretion that's taking place where the average guy isn't really being informed as to exactly what Dr. Paul's direction and intent and motives are at this time. Certainly we're all aware that he said from the beginning he was in it to win it, and we're all aware that he is yet to endorse anyone else. So it appears to me that the old fox has something up his sleeve, and he didn't spend 30 years in Congress to be made looking foolish on his way out and towards retirement. So I'm inclined to think that follow the guidance of him. I know there's some that are suspicious of his campaign handlers, but ultimately I'm sure he has a pretty close eye on them, and I'm hopeful that the outcome is positive for Dr. Ron Paul. It seems that all is moving forward and time is getting short, so in a matter of days we'll start having answers to these curiosities, and I hope they're all positive answers for Dr. Paul.
Tell you what, I do trust Dr. Ron Paul, but I don't trust the Republican National Committee, the convention, anything there. They have been nothing but a band of criminals and thugs. You saw what happened to the Maine convention. We hope to be able to talk with Ginger over the weekend on the Sunday show. But man, oh man, they went to them and said, hey, how about if we take half of your delegates, right? Make a deal. Wait, but all 20 of our delegates were elected fair and square. Well, we don't care. And they said no deal. And it showed the RNC for what it was because they went ahead and took them anyway.
Yep.
Other attempts at rule changes, Super Don. They said, well, what are we going to do here? We can't. Oh, how about 10 states plurality, not 5? That didn't pass. I mean, they are desperate to not have Ron Paul nominated from the floor. But now they've taken away plurality in Maine. Where else have they done this? In Louisiana.
Yeah.
I mean, these are scums and scoundrels, not in a good way, in any way, the Republican. And we knew that going in. But the question was, would they play at all fair by their own rules? And they've continued to move the rules and move the chains as it goes along. And Ron Paul just stands there with all the integrity that oozes out of his pores, that makes them all look horrible. I say this is the end of the RNC if this goes the way I'm thinking it might at this point.
Well, I could only hope. But, I just, when it comes to compromise, I just have the utmost respect for Maine, the way they handled it.
Yes.
They were asked to compromise. They said, screw you. They still ended up with the same number of delegates that they would have gotten if they had compromised. But now they stuck to their principles, and the RNC now gets to wear the black eye for the situation.
Right. The RNC is now exposed for who they are.
Live around the world.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.